Radina, can you talk broadly about the components of the CLCPA? You know, Kara touched on this a little bit, but that address environmental justice.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. So real quick, just a 20-second overview of what the PACE Energy and Climate Center is. We are a nonprofit think tank. It's a project of PACE University. We're located right here on campus. We are lawyers, economists. We work with engineers on developing policy solutions, including on primarily buildings decarbonization right now, just transition as well. We've developed reports on how to help communities facing a closure of coal-fired power plants in New York do a just transition in terms of their labor force and tax base. And we're also educators, and I want to give a shout out to my students from my energy law class who are here today. And I think we at PACE very much focus on a practical curriculum to make sure that we develop the future energy leaders who are going to help us solve these problems. Kara did an excellent job talking through the environmental justice components of the CLCPA. And I was actually going to go through the Just Transition Working Group and the Climate Justice Working Group, but since we have that foundation, I think what I might want to do is dig a little bit deeper on what some of that activity might look like on the ground. And so one of the things that we've been working on for a long time, way before the CLCPA was passed, was the question of how to reduce barriers to access within low and moderate income communities and disadvantaged communities to clean energy in New York. This is not a new question. This isn't something that arose out of the CLCPA. I see a lot of faces in this room who have been talking to you about this for many years now. So some of those barriers that the CLCPA is going to be addressing, both through direct funding and program development and policy development, are going to be questions like, how do we reduce financing barriers? How do we make sure that, for example, multifamily building owners and operators, property managers, understand what their clean energy options are? There are a myriad of programs across municipal, state, federal, sometimes from clean energy technology developers, from utilities, that are kind of scattered across the clean energy sphere. And so one challenge is getting that information to consumers in an understandable and in a clear, comprehensible, and compelling way to spur action. Another challenge is understanding financing. So a lot of times financing can be a challenge, particularly, for example, for rent-stabilized or rent-controlled multifamily housing. I think property managers already are facing a lot of challenges in keeping their properties up to code and meeting housing standards. To add on top of that, things like developing funding for geothermal or air source heat pumps for energy efficiency, for solar, whether it's location-based or community-based, like we have some projects happening in White Plains right now for community solar. All of these things require more money, and understanding how to package together financing solutions, working with state incentives, federal incentives, local incentives, and with lenders and with the Green Bank, the New York Green Bank. These are complex matters that people are going to need help with. And so I think as we think about CLCPA implementation for environmental justice, these are the kinds of in-depth questions we're going to have to continue working on. And I really do want to emphasize this is not a first starting point that we've never worked on before. We're already working on these issues. It's just a question of ramping up the speed and effectiveness of the policy solutions that we're already working on developing.